you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. And at first, I would like to thank you very much, the organizing committee of the conference, for the opportunity to talk today, because I had and still have some problems, and I hope that I will be able to cope with them, but still now I can talk. And again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. So that today I would like to talk about onomastic code of culture, and especially to illustrate it with the names of lilac, and the names of lilac, which was given by Leonid Kolesnikov, one of the greatest lilac breeders over Russia, and how it happened that I became interested in this topic. In May, half a year, yes, before in May, my students and me went to the botanical gardens of Lomonosov Moscow State University, and all the pictures here in the presentation are taken in the botanical garden. And there were two alleys with different varieties, different sorts of lilac, and one part of the alley was dedicated to the breeders from Russia, and another part of the lilac was illustrated the examples of lilac from the breeders from France, Italy, Germany, and other countries. And when we listened to the history of naming of lilac in France, it turns out that a lot of names were dedicated to wives, to daughters, or to lovers of the breeders. And when we discussed the history of names of lilac, which was produced in the Soviet Union, because most of that part was let it be, was born, yes, in the Soviet Union. It turns out that most of the names reflect the history of the Soviet Union, and reflect the history of the past, and they are dedicated to different events or to famous people. And one of their functions is not only to individualize the lilac, the sort of lilac, but also the commemorative function. And that's why I tried to have a look at Leonid Kolesnikov's varieties of lilac, and he is the author of more than 500 different varieties of lilac, but now we have only 109, because Kolesnikov himself and his lilac had and still have a difficult fate, and Leonid Kolesnikov lived from 1893 till 1968, and his first garden was the garden on Sokol. It's the part of Moscow, and when Kolesnikov was young, his father had his dacha there, and the first lilac tree, we may say so, was from France, and that's a very famous breeder, Lotman, and that's the name of the bush, the sort of lilac, and perhaps that was the inspiration for Leonid Kolesnikov to find his collection. But Kolesnikov had a very difficult fate, and he took part in 3 wars, and he was the driver, and he visited different countries during wars, and he saw that a lilac, different again sorts of lilac, had different names, and the lilac was really very beautiful, and he wanted to transform the perception of lilac from just an ordinary tree in the garden, and to be perceived as the piece of art, real natural art. So his first garden was on Sokol, and there were only 3,400 square meters, but he managed to grow there 5,000 lilac varieties. And unfortunately, the garden was destroyed when Moscow grew, and this part of Moscow became not the village, but the part of the city, and the garden was destroyed and was taken to another part of Moscow, which again after that was destroyed. So the fate was really difficult, and the collection of and a lot of his sorts, they are lost now, although some of them we may find again in Europe and in France, in Italy, in Spain, in Germany, in Canada also, I don't know, maybe even in the United States of America. And now in Lomonosov Moscow State University we have his collection, and we have 109 varieties of lilac, and still our scientists, they are trying, our botanics, they are trying to find his sorts in different countries or in different gardens, because a lot of his varieties were described. And why I think that names of lilac, it's a kind of onomastic code of culture, because the names of lilac, they incorporate the history of the country, the glory of the country, and they perform the so-called commemorative function. And the onomastic code has a dual nature, being part of the verbal code and at the same time representing the code of culture. Why again that's the code of culture? Because when we use the names, if we understand the meaning which is incorporated in them, then we can understand each other, and then we can communicate successfully. If we don't know the encyclopedic information which is hidden in the name, then it is quite difficult to understand each other, to see the meaning, to get the meaning which perhaps is incorporated in it. And an onomastic code is a set of signs and a system of certain rules with the help of which cultural information is presented or encoded in a certain context. And an onomastic code is a system of correspondences between the units of an onomasticon, or between the units of proper names, and socio-cultural knowledge, the so-called encyclopedic knowledge. Structurally, the onomastic code consists of individualizing signs of different types, information that these signs encode. Of course, now I mean that's encyclopedic information, not linguistic information, and also as well as knowledge about the rules for the functioning of proper names in culture, and especially associations connected with this or that name, because when time goes, some names, we forget about some names, about some famous people which were again famous maybe at the beginning of the 20th century, and now we don't know them, we don't remember them. And sometimes that names, the phytonyms, yes, the names of lilac and of different even of flowers, these names help us to preserve our history. We emphasize the fact that the linguistic aspect of the name seems to be least changing, and the encyclopedic aspect changes a lot, and it depends on the social cultural context. And this research is based on the typological analysis of Olga Leonid, and she enumerated different approaches to the research, or to the study of the ways how we can incorporate cultural meaning in the language, and that might be the verbalization method. So how this cultural meaning is verbalized, then in terms of accordance between form and content, again how the form coincides, or their relationships between the form and the content, place of cultural meaning, whether that's implicit or explicit representation, grade of the cultural component, whether it is important or it's not so important, the way the content is delivered by the nature of the relationship according to the degree of independence of the cultural component, and so on. And if we think about varieties, yes, of lilac, I have worked out a number, I have worked out the categories of analysis, and they are presented here. So the presence or absence of a proper name in the name of lilac, and out of 109 names of lilac, we have 80 names based on proper names, so that that names of lilac, they might include a proper name, for example Aleksey Maresyev, or they of course might be without a proper name at all, and that's the example blue, the Russian variant Golubaya. And the most names, they are based on anthroponyms, on proper names, again performing commemorative function. For example, Aleksey Maresyev is a well-known Russian pilot. He took part in the Second World War, and he had more than he had 86 flights, and then of course he was injured, and even his feet were amputated, but still after that he continued the flights, and was a very famous pilot. And he is the prototype of the character of a well-known novel which is called The Hero, the hero of not the hero, but the novel of a real person. So now when I ask my students who Aleksey Maresyev was, I should say that not all of them remember him. And when we see his name, at least during our excursions in the botanical gardens, that's the occasion when we can tell them about the history of the country. And the second example with blue, in most cases, the names which are not based on a proper name, they are descriptive. They describe maybe the color of the lilac, or maybe the form of the flowers of the lilac, or something of the kind. Then the next one is the type of a proper name, which is incorporated in a phytonym. That might be anthroponym, for example, Valentina Gruzadubova, or that might be hedronym, Baikal, that might be godonym, Kremlin carrots, that might be toponym, Soviet Arctic, or that might be even name of a flower, and you can see it here. And here we have even two names, yes, in one, because that's hortensia, that's the name of the flower, and that is also the name of the sort of lilac, because the flowers of lilac, they remind us of the flowers of the form of the flowers of the flower hortensia. So that the name but the name reminds us of the flower, not only of the lilac. And of course, most names are taken from anthroponyms, and just if you are based on toponyms and on hydronyms, which are culturally unmarked. Again, 62 out of 109 are cultural marked, and that's, for example, the name Jawaharlal Nehru, which is also, which is connected with the history of India. Then that's Jambul, and this name has a double connection. On the one hand, that's the name of the town in Tajikistan, and on the other hand, that's the name of the Soviet poet. And of course, we don't know which, yes, that's the name of the Soviet poet of the city in Tajikistan, Leonid Kolesnikov, meant when he gave his lilac this name, but it commemorates both. Then we see Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya, that's the Soviet culture, Paul Robson, American culture, memory of the Tripoli tragedy, that's the Ukrainian culture, and so on and so forth. More than 30 different cultures are reflected in the names, in Kalesnikov names. And then what I also studied, that's the thematical spheres, from which the names come. And here we can find family, ideology, science, place, culture, description, war, and association. These different names, and here are the examples. And the most number comes from the part ideology, and here we have examples. For example, the banner of Lenin, of course. Kalesnikov lived during the Soviet time, and here his lilac has a lot of names connected with Lenin. And then Kalinin, also the presentation of the Soviet past, dawn of communism, again 40 years of Komsomol, kolkhoz woman, that's Nadezhda Krupskaya, that's Lenin's wife, and glory to Stalin. So all these names are dedicated to the Soviet Union and to the ideology. And what is very interesting, it's the attitude towards Stalin is very different. For example, of course, in the Soviet Union, it was only the glory given to Stalin, but now it is very different, and it depends on the person and on the generation, only as a tyrant, and of course, not as a popular character, not as a popular hero. Then the next is that's culture, and also the culture incorporates a lot of allusions. For example, Sergei Gerasimov, and again, this is an example of a person who used to be very popular. It's a well-known Russian producer, but now only a few people remember him, and again, people who are 50 years old and more than 50 years old, and people who are 20, who are 30, they don't remember him. Though he was a well-known producer, and he worked in big, and he had a number of different awards, again by Lenin and by Stalin. And then we have here also Nikolai Ostrovsky, Vera Mukhina, Galina Ulanova, Andrusha Gromov, Eisenstein, Leonid Leonov, Sholokhov, and so representatives of different cultural spheres, and cinema and theater and ballet and literature, of course, and so on and so forth. The next part is war, and this sphere also a lot of names are dedicated because I have already mentioned that Leonid Kolesnikov, he took part in 3 wars. So that's Marshal Vasilevsky, the branch of peace, spring of 1942, great victory, Marshal Zhukov, General Vatutin, defenders of Moscow. Most of them are dedicated to the Second World War, and we have in Lomonosov Moscow State University, the Alley of Memory, and there we have Kalesnikov's lilac, and the sorts of lilac were taken. Were taken only the sorts dedicated to the war. And then science, of course, and that's about Michurin, Timiryazov, Moscow University, Yuri Gagarin, Marina Gibina, academic Maximov, and Marina Gibina, she was the researcher in Lomonosov Moscow State University, and she helped Kalesnikov to find, to study biology and to study botanics, because Kalesnikov was not a scientist, he was a driver, and lilac, and that's breeding, that was his hobby, and he didn't know a lot about that, but he tried, he practiced a lot, and Marina Gibina helped him to find the information about lilac and different sorts and different ways of breeding, and that's why he commemorated one of his varieties of lilac to her. Then, of course, to Moscow University, because he spent not a lot of time, but some time there, communicating with Marina Gibina, and again using the garden of the university for his lilac. Then place, that's lights of Moscow, India, top of the Pamir, Baikal, sky of Moscow, morning of Moscow, Soviet Arctic. A lot of names are dedicated to Moscow, because most of his life he spent in Moscow here, and then description, and in description we almost find no proper names, and that's lights of Moscow, and this sort of lilac, it changes the color, it depends on the part of the day. During the day it is light, at night it becomes darker. Then cheat, and that's the sort of lilac, which has two, it might be 2 colors, and here you can see that some flowers are purple, yes, and some flowers they are more pink, or even sometimes white, yes, so that's why he called this variety as a cheat. Then we can see here porcelain, again because of the color blue, then charming spring flower, new scent, so that's the description, only the description, again in most cases of the color of lilac. And then associations which he has with his lilac, that's caprice, that's dream, abundance, laureate, hope, recognition. So again his personal associations and family. And what is interesting here, that for family he has only 4 names dedicated, only 4 sorts of lilac to the members of his family. Of course, one is dedicated to him, Leonid Kolesnikov, another is dedicated to his daughter Tamara, another one to his granddaughter Lenочka, and this one Olimpiada Kolesnikova. And sometimes we think that Olimpiada, that's Olympics, and perhaps that should be connected with the Olympic Games. No, in this case not. Olympiada is the Russian name, and that's not exactly Russian. I mean that it became popular during the Soviet Union time, and there were a lot of Olympiadas among our girls. So Olympiada, that's the name of Kolesnikov's wife. So that's Olimpiada Kolesnikova, that's the name of his wife. And in conclusion, what I'd like to say, that a proper name can act as a special cultural code. It can incorporate a lot of encyclopedic information, and it can present the history, the culture of the country. And the name itself is capable of representing and transmitting culturally market information. And we saw here a lot of examples connected with names. And for example, we have the lilac, and the name is Osipenko, and that's the name of the again pilot, the lady pilot, and she has a or difficult fate. She had a difficult fate. She was born in a poor family and not far from Kiev, and it's when she was 6 she was given to the church school, but then after some time her family didn't have enough money for her to study, and she began to work in kolkhoz, and already that happened during the Soviet time. And there one day she saw a just a moment, I have forgotten the word, a real plane, and she saw a woman pilot, and her dream, and she started dreaming to become a pilot, and then she went to Kiev and entered the college and managed even to graduate it, and then flew a lot. She didn't take part in any military actions, but she got a number of records at her time for the longest flight, for the highest flight, so that her name also used to be very, very famous. Again, maybe not so famous now, but it really was very famous. So, and the last one, a proper name is capable of transmitting a large amount of information and acting as a form of preserving cultural and historical heritage. And thank you for your attention. And that's the picture of the university, of our garden, the botanical gardens, and that's the two alleys. The one alley full of mostly this French lilac, and that's another alley, Kalesnikov's alley, and my students here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there are any questions, I would try to answer them.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I found the presentation enlightening, and especially because where I live here, very, very near Spokane, Washington, the city of Spokane refers to itself as the city of lilacs, and they have the lilac parade, and they make much of lilacs, but the variety of lilacs is fascinating. I think there are far fewer varieties in this area than there are in Moscow. So I really enjoyed the presentation about the great variety of lilacs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grant.
There is a comment or a question here from Chris Devin. Let me check the chat. Such an abundance of lilac names, Veronika, great connections to culture. May I ask you, who actually names them? Who decides which name to give to that specific variety, and why that name for that specific flower? Is there like a sort of criteria that should be followed, or it's just
in
random?
most cases? Thank you for the question. In most cases, that's the breeder who gives the name to his variety of lilac. And again, that's the breeder's choice, because there are, at least in the Russian tradition, there are no rules somehow restricting, yes, the names. Of course, no obscene names, but all the other variants are possible. And again, in Russian tradition, a lot of names are dedicated to culture, and only a few names are dedicated to some personal aspects. That's in most cases, that's family. Again, the name of daughter, the name of maybe mother, the name of wife, but that's just a few, as for example in Kalesnikov's variant. And most of the names are dedicated to the country, and a lot of to the scientists, and now mostly to the scientists. And because for new varieties of lilac, we have very little names connected with ideology. Kalesnikov lived during the Soviet time. That's why we can see a lot of realities connected with that period. And now mostly that is connected with history and with different scientific events. And for example, in our botanical gardens, we even have the flower dedicated to the rector of Lomonosov Moscow State University, and which is called Sadovnichi. So that's just maybe dedicated to living people, to dead people, but the breeder chooses it.
Well, I was also wondering if maybe that's not the case, but do flowers, are they renamed? Like from maybe a too ideological name, so they decided to rename it to avoid that connection?
The truth, I don't know. I have never, yes, I have never came across it. I didn't come across it. Maybe it happens, but I have never seen it. The streets, yes, they are renamed. But as for the names, again, of flowers, of lilac, of trees, and so on and so forth, I have never seen it. And one of my postgraduate students now is writing her dissertation about the names of flowers in the Russian language and in the German language. And neither in Russian nor in German, we don't have any examples of renaming of flowers. Maybe they are not so controversial, or maybe they are not so well known, and they don't construct their reality. Because when, for example, ideologies change, we change at least that's in Russian tradition. Yes, we change the names of country, of the names of cities. We change the names of streets. Then we change it vice versa, because again, we can see it every day. These names, they are the parts of our reality. As for the flowers, trees, lilac, and so on, that's not so many people are interested in the names. We can see a beautiful bush, and that's all.
That's it.
Well, the nature of flowers change simply by DNA proliferation and nature's constant changing, whereas a city or a human-made feature perhaps is identified because it doesn't have the biological change. But when there is a change in the biology, as Darwin describes, it is something different, and those who breed something different, of course, can have a name attached to it. So who is to control that? But we can control the naming of a street, of course. But even streets, of course, are repaved, they are rerouted and of that sort. But I think the biological world is different from other things.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the comment, Grant.
I look at the I will look at my lilacs in a different way now, but I wonder whether I would plant a variety that is named Glory of Stalin. That's not very commercial, I think, nowadays.
Yes, again, that's the changing function, because during the Soviet time, yes, it was very popular because the attitude to the person was different. Now, of course, it is not popular, and in Russia also, that's not popular. And well, I don't know, well, a lot of people who would like to buy, yes, this variety, this type of lilac, but we never know. Or maybe the history, well, the history is changing, something might change once again, and the attitude towards the name may also change once again. So that's our world, our socio-cultural reality. It influences our perception.